Hi, everybody. Welcome to another TLC conversation. Today's topic is tips and tricks for testing, and we have 4 panelists with us, still waiting for one to join us any second. But before we get started talking about tips and tricks, I do want to first do a topic and panelist solicitation conversation. We have one conversation pending, the date yet to be scheduled on personalization and the different ways that we would do tools. And we've had requests for some Q&A sessions with different testing and personalization vendors where we would invite one technically oriented or experienced, like not a salesperson. I don't know how to say that differently, but somebody who actually knows how to use the tool and has helped companies integrate the tool. And we would invite them and sort of do a free-for-all where everybody could ask them questions about how those things work. And we're thinking about scheduling those, kind of peppering them in throughout the year. But I'm also looking for other topics. So this is your chance. You can use the, if you're on the TLC group, you can absolutely use the TLC planning or TLC calls channel to suggest ideas. You can use on the Zoom. You can use the chat interface, or you can take yourself off mute and just start shouting out some topics that you'd like to see us cover this year. And I'm going to stay silent until I get a couple of ideas. So the floor is yours.
I have an idea.
Go for it.
Hey, Kelly, this is Andrew from Fisher.
Hi, Andrew.
So sorry. Hi. Sorry I bowed out, but I'm here participating. So we are burning the midnight oil, working on GDPR compliance to make sure that our consent opt-in minimizes the fall off that we have in being able to market to the leads that come in. So we're B2C lead gen, big topic for us, big impact on our business. So that would be a great topic to hear about.
Excellent. GDPR compliance, and I got some Merritt, thank you, conference summaries. Any others?
Hey, Kelly, it's Carrie from Vanguard.
Hi, Carrie.
I think just some use cases around experimentation, like what isn't, some actual, whatever people can share in terms of data, but actual experiments.
Use cases?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Ooh, I like that, Merritt. Along that, that idea of the career path, how many of you that are currently client side and have not had experimentation consulting agency side would be interested in learning a little bit about what that's like and what the transition would be? And conversely, those of you that only have experience agency side, would you like to hear about what it's like to work client side?
I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I feel like both parties tend to feel like the grass is a little greener on the other side, so it'd be interesting to.
Yes, but there are some of us who have experience on both sides, so we can kind of speak to that. There are definite pros and cons on both sides, pretty strong ones. I think that's a pretty good list, but I want to give you guys one more chance. Is there anything else you guys want me to add? You're welcome to throw it in the Slack channel, and I'll add it later. No worries at all there as far as timing. But part of having these topic suggestions, we also need panelists. So when I send out the notes for today's calls, I will send out this list of topics. And I would like you guys to take the time to think about which of these topics makes sense for me to serve as a panelist, or a coworker that you think would be an excellent person to consider, or maybe somebody you met at a conference. It doesn't have to be somebody you work with daily that you think would be good to speak to any of these. Please send those, as well as, you know, if you have a prioritization of one that's really, really important to you over another, let me know. There's also a link here, and like I said, it's already in the Slack and it's in the group chat, to the blog that explains who we are, what we do, what our purpose is, what we're not, which is a sales channel. And if you will send these to people that you want to be a part of the TLC, then we will continue to grow the group. And as always, please get involved, join the conversation on the TLC Slack. All right, let's move on to test tips and tricks. We're gonna do a quick intro to meet your panel. Most of these folks have been on the panel in the past, so hopefully those of you who have been a part of the TLC have had a chance to meet with them. But we have Lee Wong, who's at Intuit. She's spent more than 9 years as a digital strategist, and she previously managed the development of the CMS for the talent blogs and voting app for The Voice and America's Got Talent, which is pretty darn cool. And then we have Merritt Aho of Dun & Bradstreet. He is the marketing director for testing and optimization, and he established and currently leads the global testing and optimization practice for Dun & Bradstreet. And he's currently focused on lead gen and sales pipeline. Anna is formerly of Athena Health, soon to be, what do we want to say? Like, can we say a vineyard? What do you want to say? Anything?
I think it's like a explorer. Let's go.
I love it. I love it. She's going to go explore the vineyards, poor thing, of New Zealand. So she's a future Kiwi. That's what we'll say. Former Athena Health, future Kiwi, and at least for a little while, just focus on enjoying New Zealand. But prior to her departure, which is very soon, she has a marketing foundation, a love of analytics, and a deep enthusiasm for optimization, which we can tell because she's here, even though she's already left her job. So thank you for being here. And she built the testing program for web product management team. I'm pretty sure, David, you're not here yet, are you? David Torchiano? Not there. Okay. I didn't give credit where credit is due, because Lee is also clearly very dedicated, because she is calling in from Hawaii, folks. She's on vacation. So we've got Anna here, who has left her job and analytics and optimization to head to work in the vineyards of New Zealand, and Lee, who's calling us from vacation. So that's some dedication, folks. Let's thank you guys for being here. It's pretty awesome. So let's kick off the conversation. I'm going to flip over to our shared document with our notes of some of the things that you guys wanted to cover. And let's just start with something that's kind of light and fun. If you guys would like to share a tip or trick that you've used related to changing the culture or making testing more engaging and fun with your organization. And Lee, I'll just start with you, and I'll just go in order of the folks on the panel.
So testing at Intuit is actually a program that I manage. We actually have a process where for all majority of our test launches, what we call a test launch party.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that, of making it fun, was we have this gong. I think I sent Kelly a picture of it, of someone actually hitting the gong. So, you know, we run through our test launches, make sure we turn it on, make sure everything looks good, verify beaconing and everything else, and the experience is expected. And then if everything looks good, what we do is we actually hit what we call the gong. It's also been called the bong once, accidentally. But, you know, and you can hear this both upstairs and downstairs, because I already have it in our courtyard. But at least it signals to like everyone in our building that, hey, a test has launched. So it makes it fun. It also gives the team like kind of this woohoo, you know, we spent a lot of work building this experience, and now it's launched and it's live, and people know about it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It gets everybody excited that there's something going to happen, and they can tune in and see the results later. That's great. Yeah. How about you, Merritt?
I think there are a lot of different things that can get people excited. A few that come to mind. I mean, just telling people. I mean, whether you use a gong or just blast out an email to everyone announcing that you're launching a test and what it is and what the, making it very visual so people can see like A versus B versus C. That gets people really interested. I always get lots of email comments about that kind of stuff. If you're looking at more of like a large scale to get people aware of testing and how it works and what you're doing, what we've done several times is run a test-a-thon, right? Akin to a hackathon. And fortunately, it's been pretty easy for us to get management support to do like a big event with, first we did it with all the digital team, and then we invited all of marketing to participate. And we got executives to be judges, which is hit or miss because they don't really know, a lot of them don't know a lot about testing. And so that, their judgment for what makes a good test isn't always that great. But I mean, the point is to get people excited about what you're doing and for them to become aware of your program. So that's worked really well for us. That's a big lift in terms of the effort to pull off an event like that. So
that's awesome. I like that idea. And I like even just calling it that. It gets people to think about testing as a competitive collaborative sport, because you're like competing to win with the best test ideas, but you have to work with each other to get there. And I like that idea a lot. How about you, Anna?
We even paired ours. Sorry to interrupt. We paired ours with some training sessions, right? So like we said, register your team for the test-a-thon, and then you're welcome to attend these 4 training sessions on research and analytics and test methodology. And so that was kind of a fun way to spread knowledge around the organization.
Love it.
Yeah, we also do email broadcasts whenever we had a test launch. We actually started them out originally for the developers because when we were having QA of our sites, anytime that we had a release, if a test was going on, we were getting feedback from some of the teams in India saying, hey, this page looks wrong. So we were doing it to them as kind of if you notice this page looking weird, don't worry, here are the links and the visuals. And we actually got feedback from so many marketing teams that it ended up being a much wider distro because everyone wanted to see all those links. So anytime we did a test, we had the links. But we also did, on the flip side, email announcements out that were basically like, long emails, here are all the tests that closed this week. But at the top of them, we would put a quiz question and pick whichever test we thought would be most exciting for the marketing folks and say something like, what's the increase in rate of submissions that you would expect when we go from 7 fields to 3 fields, which meant they kind of like actually read down a little bit more. So that was really fun while we were doing those.
That's awesome. So it wasn't even a which test won, it was a what impact do you think this will have?
Right. It was one of the things that we've had to do to kind of train the teams is remind them when it's worthwhile to test. And so getting them to start thinking, okay, here's a test I want to do. What's the impact I think will happen to make sure that the test is the impact we're expecting? So those questions kind of helped iterate or helped influence that kind of understanding as well. So it helped on 2 sides, getting them to read the results and getting them to think about testing positively.
Well, that segues really nicely into a follow-up question related to educating our partners and cross-functional and internal about what makes a good test. And this could be something that maybe you do through intake or through prioritization, or like you just said, in little ways through your communications to educate them about the types of things to think about. But I'm curious, what have you guys found to be the most effective?
For us, intake and prioritization was really set because it was a new program. It went through me, so because it was smaller. Mm-hmm. But what we did is, especially because the culture at Athena is all about testing and learning and failing fast, that made it really easy. And so I had a small presentation that started with the CMO, but was a couple of slides of here's how we test, here's why we test, here's when we test. And I would offer to go to any team and show that slide and then pull, 3 to 8 tests that I thought would be relevant to them, just so that they could see it and sort of get excited. And this year, because this was sort of like into the second year of it, we started maneuvering out of just typical A/B testing on the website, which is what we did initially, and started doing a lot more user testing for the website and a couple other things as well. And so we also started getting the teams excited about how we could test differently. So, you have to focus on what your question is and what your hypothesis is, and don't think, what can we test, right? There's a lot of, we can just test this hero. It's, well, what question are you trying to answer? Talk to us, and then we'll figure out the best way to test, whether that's user testing, whether that's A/B testing on the website, or whether that's, doing a survey of the sales reps because you just want to know how prospects are using their vocabulary. So that was
Right.
really,
So picking the right tool for the
Yeah.
problem. Yeah.
and we started working across teams, so that got people more excited too. But small slide decks and being willing to actually like go and talk to people when we could was the best.
How about you, Lee?
And I think to Anna's point, getting the teams involved early, not just creative coming up with the ideas, but as well as the dev. Because when we do research and user testing, I mean, we're like fortunate enough to have a lab on campus.
Right.
We ask the creative and the developers to come and sit in and hear what the customers are saying, get, firsthand feedback on what the customers are saying about some of the ideas they're putting on, whether they're doing a quick prototype of, certain buttons will work, not everything works, but at least the developers can get invested in building out that experience if we decide to go down one of those paths. I think it just gets them more engaged. So I agree with Anna's point of like making sure the teams are involved early, whether that's, research or actual experimentation for in-market testing.
Yep. How about you, Merritt?
No, I'm thinking your question is like, how do you educate people on what a good test idea is? And I gotta say, I think that's one of the hardest things to do. And one of the things that I've spent so much time trying to do internally and banging my head against the wall a lot. I have a roadshow deck that I take around to other teams, and I say, this is what we're testing. This is why we're testing. I introduce concepts like the curse of knowledge and expertise bias, and why we're not always good judges of what our visitors are struggling with. And that's why we do research, and that's why we look at the analysis, and that's why we iterate. I spent all this time teaching methods and theory to people, and still, it's a struggle to tell someone why their idea is not that great. and at the end of the day, I'm kind of beholden to my own doctrine of like, hey, we don't always know what's going to win, right? Win rate is 30%. Technical win rate is like, it's pretty low, right? So who am I to say that that's not going to work? I can tell you why I believe it won't work, but that's not particularly helpful, other than to point out that this is, I don't think it is an easy subject to master.
No, I totally agree. And, I threw out earlier, just sort of casually, using intake and prioritization as a way to educate. And that really didn't come from my place to kind of call back to our earlier conversation about client versus agency. That's something that I learned after I came to the agency. It was how important it was as clients were hiring us to build out a program for them to educate the client about what made a good test, which if you think of your testing program as an internal agency, that's what we're all doing. It's just when you're in there, sometimes it's hard to see, right in front of you because you're so integrated and connected. But from somebody that's coming in on the outside, it's like glaring, and it's really obvious that there's some gaps there. So the way that we tend to approach it is through intake and prioritization. So that in the intake, we create some kind of form or tool or whatever, or process, even sometimes it's an interview, but it includes things like, what problem are you problem or question or objective, whatever, are you trying to solve or answer or whatever with this test? What decisions are you going to make based on this test? What would disprove your hypothesis? What evidence do you have about that hypothesis? And what evidence, if we found it, would disprove your hypothesis and mean that we no longer need to do this test? As you ask all of those questions, they start understanding the stuff that they need to bring to the table to get their test to move forward. And then you build some kind of prioritization model, and it's different for nearly every single customer client, but you build a prioritization that takes that stuff into consideration. Is this evidence-based? Is it an iteration? Is there some sort of time-bound decision that's related to it? The percentage of your audience that's going to be impacted by it, all of those types of things. We don't just look at complexity of design or dev and revenue impact. If you expand it to say, hey, was this a good idea? Then the ideas will start naturally. First of all, you weed them out in the beginning through intake, and then when they come into prioritization, they'll fall to the bottom if they don't meet those standards. So it's worth looking into, and it's easier than telling somebody their baby's ugly, to your point, Merritt, when it's really hard to tell somebody that their idea is stupid. So if you can come to them instead and say, oh, hey, could you fill out this form or answer these questions? And when they can't, you go, oh, okay, well, when you get those answers, or I can help you get those answers, or whatever it needs to be. I don't think we're quite ready to turn this into a test, and they tend to take that a little bit better.
I think to your point, Kelly,
you're
that's
kind of reminding me
true as
of
well.
You're okay. Lee first.
Well, what you said, because inversely of like getting, just creative and developers engaged in building out the experience, you do get the, hey, I have this idea, I want to do it. But to your point, asking the question of like, hey, what are you trying to do? What's your hypothesis? Having them really focus on that and what their metrics they're trying to learn a decision is the better way to say, you may not want to test this, right? Or there may be alternative like user testing or something else to test.
Yeah, that's right. What were you going to say, Merritt?
So you reminded me of some training that I think you took way back when at Dell about dealing effectively with others and not saying no, but saying this is what is required to say yes.
Yeah.
Right. So like instead of rejecting the idea, like, well, in order for me to do that, I need to know, you need to think through these 7 issues. And really then like look at the opportunity cost of running that test versus anything else you've got in front of you.
And as important as that is as an internal client-side agency, it's impossible to be a consultant without that mindset.
I had an awesome program manager who was an absolute idea man, right? Everything could be tested, wanted to test everything, exactly the type of person you want to work with. But when I was leaving Athena, I actually wrote out a couple slides for the team. They have Adobe and SDI helping them in the interim while they hire back up. But I was like, please don't start a test unless you can answer these 8 questions. And when I was like, this is specifically for you. What is the KPI? Can it be measured? How long will the test take? Here's a gut pulse of how long it will probably take to reach that amount of traffic. Is it competing with a different test that you think is more important? And what we would do is conversations where instead of an intake form, it was a test plan. And until the test plan could be finalized, we couldn't move forward because there are a lot of really great ideas of how to answer a question, but the measurement piece of it can get hairy, especially when you have internally built analytics.
Oh my goodness, that is so true. Yep. Well, let's talk about gaining organizational buy-in for controversial ideas, because I think again it kind of flows naturally here. So you're talking about how hard it is to tell an internal cross-functional partner that their idea is bad. Conversely, sometimes when you have a really solid idea backed by really great evidence, whether it's iteration or a deep dive analysis, or maybe a user testing or focus group, and you feel really confident this is good, but it's going to be hard to do. What are the methods that you guys have used or found successful to convince people that this is a test that should be run?
So
go ahead, Lee.
quarterly planning, which actually has been really good for us in terms of prioritization. In the past, where we'd have different product managers with ideas and teams with ideas, resourcing is challenged, right? And we used to have what we call these testing steering committees, where the leaders would help prioritize that. But now that we've moved towards quarterly planning, it's actually made it a lot easier, I want to say, because that basically gets shared across all of the teams in the quarterly planning, and the product managers there to get buy-in from the different resources. Granted, usually they've already gotten buy-in from the leadership team to say, yeah, we think this is a good idea. You have an analyst stacked against it, and the analyst agrees, because that's the other thing we always want to make sure is the product managers is working hand in hand with their analysts to understand, is there a test plan? Can you actually measure, and how long it would take?
Sure.
We have sort of a different challenge where the content and leadership teams are not all kind of digitally minded in terms of the background. And so often the ideas that are being pushed forward forget important pieces. So a good example would be, they want to change the tone and the voice to be very specific. We want to seem individualized, but that would mean we lose all of the vocabulary that people are searching for, and then our pages can't be found. And so, or there's a guarantee going out and they want to put it on the home page and take away the demo button. I'm like, that isn't a good idea. So a lot of times it's actually because people are so excited to try and fail. When we hear something that makes us a little nervous, we'll say, well, can we test that instead? And it's great, because within a week you see some numbers drop, and leadership is very, if you can say, oh, we got one lead in a week instead of 50, they're going to pay attention there.
Sure.
And I think it's also thinking ahead. There's a lot of listening at Athena, where you kind of hear the ideas people have and you start testing ahead of time. So we have a very structured form set up, but there's talk of changing that potentially. And so we've started doing minor tests on forms, because we know that's in 2017, because we knew it was going to come up in 2018. And so we sort of try to see the writing on the wall of the analytics that'll be helpful for future conversations, which is kind of a luxury to be able to do that, but it really helps.
How about you, Merritt?
A couple of thoughts. I mean, I think the concept of pre-wiring people is huge here, right? Like figuring out where objections are likely to come from, and engaging people up front, giving voice to their concerns, and informing them what your intentions are, and sort of adjusting your plan to accommodate them as much as you can. I think putting together a good presentation that clearly articulates research and that is very specific about what you want to do. I found that, if I approach a group about something that is, a big concept and something that's maybe objectionable, people will imagine all sorts of problems into it. And so if you can be very specific with your planning, as much detail as you can wrangle together ahead of time to stave off some of those questions and keep the imagination from going wild, helps a lot. In terms of the research that you do, getting voice of customer, showing what competitors are doing, showing data as much as you have it, those all help a lot for me to make business cases out of things.
Have any of you tried working with your maybe a friend developer to create like a lean version of what you want, and used a interactive example of what you're wanting to try with either internal customers or usertesting.com or whatever, and use that as evidence for this controversial idea?
I mean, I've done that just at small scale. I can't think of a time when I've had to do that over something that I knew I would have to fight for.
I think a little different. We have our sort of paid media team is separate than our organic channels. And so there are times where I've roped in the paid media team and we've stood up something on a landing page for a Google AdWord that we think will get a lot of traffic, that, you know, just building it in free HTML on one page is a lot simpler than building it out in our actual CMS. And so we'll kind of tag team, and they don't have people specifically focused on testing. They lean on us for that. And so we'll actually raise our hand and say, okay, I know this test isn't specifically about conversions for you, but it'll help, you know, us as a whole decide how the marketing should go forward. So sort of similar, but just using other kind of channels and teams to be able to test and get some influential ideas. We've done that also just with, like, when we don't have an idea, when we have, you know, all right, there's 6 people in a room that keep arguing about how our copy should come through, we'll say, all right, let's just run some tests on Google AdWords so that we can end this conversation, versus trying to actually build out the page and see the effect of SEO and let them know it's going to tank. We can kind of use other channels to get some directional data as a starting point of what we want to test.
That makes sense. What other data or tools or integrations have you guys found most useful? Like, let's start by sharing with us what testing tool you're currently using and what other tools you use in addition, if any, or what other data that you use for ideation, prioritization, and testing, personalization, all of it.
That's quite a bit, Kelly.
No, it's not. Not for everybody. So what tool are you using?
We use Adobe Target.
I think that's really broad.
Testing platform.
Yeah.
So you use Adobe Target for testing and optimization.
We use Adobe Target for testing and optimization. We use Adobe Analytics for the data collection and the analysis. So we pull data out of Adobe Analytics and do the test analysis offline. Mm-hmm. I have found, I mean, so at the front end of, you know, the vast array of technologies and methods that you introduced here, I would say, like, one integration that was really critical for us. So we're, as you mentioned in my intro, we're a lead gen shop, right? Our main goal of our websites is to get people to fill out forms, or to pick up the phone and call us, or to engage one of our sales reps in a chat discussion. And so just getting the tracking for each of those channels has been, you know, frankly, a challenge for us. But, like, phone calls especially is not something that people often think of as you know, easily integrated with your analytics data. We were able to overcome that with Dialog Tech is our phone provisioning technology. And so now we have, like, enriched call data in our Adobe Analytics data. We actually have all our conversion data in there now, and it's that's been indispensable for enabling our testing program.
And aren't you the one that integrated SalesForce?
We are in the process of integrating SalesForce through from ad serving level and affiliate click level all the way through to phone calls, chats, and web forms, all the way through to SalesForce, and then back the other way.
So once you do that, you'll be able to optimize end to end.
Yep, once we do that, then our testing KPIs are SQLs or sales qualified leads rather than just inquiries or leads.
See, that's the reason I asked the question, because I knew you were working on that. I was giving you the perfect opportunity. I think it's pretty awesome. How about you, Lee and Anna? What do you guys have? What have you found? What tool have you integrated with, or found the most interesting or helpful for your programs?
For us, for tracking and prioritization, funny enough, we use QuickBase and Excel. So that gives all the teams visibility on what's being tested. But in terms of the actual experimentation tool, it's an in-house tool that we built that we used, you know, we have our marketing team actually built what they call an experience management system, where they were using it both as to manage which experience to show based on which landing page or which home page, if they were like a returning customer or a new customer, and what to show them. And they use that also for their A/B testing. And then we have a separate tool for in product that's an internal tool where we use to run all of our experiments. Now, we don't actually use the data from there because it all runs through our internal database, because we join a lot of different various tables that we collect from all of our customers to really understand what the customer behavior is. So for our test read, which I'm glad we actually have this, because it actually helps with some of the conversations of what they're trying to test, because we have standard metrics that we use in our test reads with, conversion, revenue, care contacts that we always measure against. There's some tests where you're testing certain things, but at least with the standard, the templates, you can use that also to understand what ideas really should be tested as well. So it makes it really easier to go through the conversations of what to build and what to test with like standard metrics.
How about you, Anna?
Tool
you guys like?
Yeah, our base is Adobe Target and Adobe Analytics also. It was about a year ago now, maybe a little more, that we actually did the A4T integration. So doing just that was a humongous game changer. But then on top of that, also getting the integrations with our heat mapping tools so that we can be not just looking at kind of the submission data, but also letting our designers watch how people are moving through it. So we'll do things like, if there's a button that they're confused about, we'll tag it in the Adobe Target test, so that then there's a tag in MouseFlow where they can just watch the recordings where someone's actually interacted with it. So that was really cool. And then there was one other piece. Shoot, Merritt, you jogged my memory with it. Oh, we haven't done this yet, but one of the things I'm most excited about is that we're really, in the industry that we're in, it used to be a lot of quick lead gen, and now there's definitely more of a buyer's journey, just given everything that's going on in the healthcare industry. And so we're actually working on connecting and we sort of connect the buyer's journey phases with sort of the same phases that we talk through with our sales folks. So we're actually going to be connecting the SalesForce definitions of where they are in the pipeline back to the website, and being able to see how testing affects people depending on where they are in the pipeline. So that integration of data is, going to happen the first half of this year, and I think will be really exciting, because one of the things we have trouble with is who are the people that are actually coming to the website? Should the messaging be for people at the top of the funnel, or are these people receptive, or are these people sales has already talked to? And there are some very differing opinions. And so just being able to integrate that with what we're testing to be able to talk better to who those people are, because there isn't any login. These are all, people who are from outside.
Yep.
That's helpful. And it's also, the match rate isn't the best with any of the tools, but we've been doing a lot with demand base as well, integrating that in. So there's definitely a Frankenstein of tools out there that we're working through.
Yeah, there always are. Lee just added a question to the channel on the TLC on the call channel. So anybody who has experience with using heat mapping tools, feel free to share with us on the TLC Slack channel, the call channel, any ideas that you have for heat mapping tools that you like. Let's dive into, oh look, there's heat maps. We already did that one, say no. Oh, I've got a good one. How do you guys explain conversion rate optimization to people who don't know what you do? So when somebody says, Lee, tell me what you do, how do you explain it? What's your elevator pitch for explaining what you do?
I'm lucky in the sense that I can tell them I manage the A/B testing portfolio, a lot of the details of the actual A/B test. we'll have to basically wrangle the analysts and the product managers to sit and do a deep dive if we
So
need
you're
to.
telling me you're on a flight and somebody says, what is it that you do with Intuit? And you say, I manage the A/B testing portfolio. And they don't go, huh?
They do go, huh? And I kind of explain what A/B testing is for them. I mean, Intuit is has such a huge testing culture, which is awesome. So yeah, it's really more the challenge is getting teams understand, to Merritt's point, what not to test, right?
Right.
Rather than testing.
Right.
But that's usually my thing. I manage this, and I generally work with all of our teams to think through what the ideas are that we
Sure.
want to test, and as well as the nice thing of managing the portfolio is I have seen tests, come through. And when we get a new product manager or some new ideas come through where they're like, we want to test this, I can always go back to say, well, we've already tested this. Here's the test dashboard. Here's some of the things we learned on why we don't want to test it again. So that's,
Right.
increasing contacts or conversion didn't go as well as we hoped. And also poking with how are you testing differently with the same idea that you think we would get, we would increase conversion or revenue, right?
Sure. Sure. So in your scenario, most of the people that talk to you about anything to do with your job are at Intuit and they understand it already. How about you, Merritt?
So constant struggle here. I'm constantly testing out different ways to explain this to people. Like my mom, if I figure my mom can get it, then, I've got it right. And I don't think she gets it yet, but
no, neither.
I think I'm on right now. What I say is I run marketing experiments on the internet.
Oh, that's good. That's nice and short.
Yeah, that usually doesn't, as you know, that does not paint the full picture of what the job entails, but it gets people thinking in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, I found that lately when I try to do any kind of explanation like that, they're like, oh, you mean like Facebook data?
Oh,
Like, well, kinda. So then it gets a little more delicate.
Yeah.
How about you, Anna? What do you describe, or what did you describe? How are you going to describe to the folks in New Zealand what it was you did?
I feel like the word testing people get a lot. So when I talk about testing and optimization, I say how there's sort of three main goals, and I kind of go from the goal side. So I say, we have three goals. One is to increase conversions, which would be for our side submissions. We're just trying to drive lead generation. So surprising people and telling them, changing it from an animation to a smiling person at the top of a page can make a huge difference and get them kind of thinking about something simple, and then saying, so it goes from simple like that, just changing a couple words, all the way to doing tests to decide what our developers work on. So there's a lot of competing projects. And so we don't just do tests to immediately increase conversions, but then we also do tests to make decisions about what should be worked on. Those are, in my mind, almost the more critical tests, because you can learn and change something versus something that's going to take a developer 2 months to work on.
Yeah, that's great.
big.
And that's way better than letting them work on it for 2 months and then using you to risk mitigate it.
Yes, exactly. And then I usually add in that testing is beyond just the A/B testing of the website, but that there's other testing like user testing and getting panels, and so kind of running the gamut there.
So definitely not an elevator pitch, but by the time you're done, they understand what you're doing.
Totally.
Yeah, yeah. I leave it to my husband to explain. I go, and I generally say, I use data to help companies make better decisions. It's basic, right? And he's like, no, she makes websites work better for you. And I'm like, do I really? I think we all know that's not always the case, but yeah, I'll take that. It's not easy to explain for sure. All right, how about quality control? The most exciting topic, but it is actually quite important. I've seen so many different methodologies that people use to focus on how they do QA and monitoring. I'd love for you guys to share any experiences you have that you think are are either unique or, air quotes, best practices for folks to think about?
That was a huge one for us. When I first started building the program, I was doing my own QA, and I had to escalate all the way up to, one of the VPs of development to say, you can't have me QAing tests on the homepage. Like, it can't just be me. Think of all the QA that you do for the homepage of the website. When we're releasing something, a test is just as important. It's getting half of the traffic sometimes. That's unacceptable, and there's so much risk. And so the problem was that the resources of, we are agile and we have Scrum teams, but the testing is done outside of it. And so getting the QA resources for that was tough, but we actually worked a little bit with our Adobe Target consultants, and they had really great documentation of all the ways to kind of walk through QA that we were able to pass to some of the developers. And so by getting those approvals up and above, and using that documentation and putting it in Confluence and putting it in Dex and putting it in some other places and showing how serious it was, that documentation made it so that the senior leaders could see how important QA is, and then roll it out. I think the other thing that we do in relation to, so right now it's folks that don't work on the website who are developers on other pieces actually do the QA for our tests, which is also great because they're not familiar with it, which is huge. I mean, I think that's my biggest tip is, after I've done an extra QA of something, I'll just send it to someone in another department and as a friend and say, will you just look at this and make sure I'm not missing something really obvious? And there will be times where like a demo button is duplicated or something, but I'm so used to scrolling up and down that I haven't realized that it was twice. I just think I haven't looked at it yet on a page. And then the other thing is that it's sort of QA, but not, is the user testing beforehand. So kind of like pre-testing ideas before you're launching them on the website is, whenever we can do it, that's awesome.
Awesome.
I've got some input here. So if you can, hire an awesome developer who likes to build stuff, because they can do some amazing stuff if they don't like to repeat mundane tasks. So I mean,
Smart and lazy.
Everything from like, yeah, everything from like building bookmarklets, right, that help check things on a page or do things like we have one that you click and it tells you all of the test campaigns that are running on a page, right? It's instead of having to look into your developer console and querying the data object that contains the metadata for the test. And then like our developer has even been scripting out all these QA tests, which saved our heinies for a recent test. But he basically wrote scripts that would check for elements on the page and then would crawl our site to ensure that things that were working, and then throw flags wherever they weren't. He uncovered an error that was happening 2% of the time, but that 2% of the time was catastrophic to the customer experience. So that was huge for us, and he continues to build out stuff like that. I mean, we also contract out with an outside agency to outsource QA to a team in India, so they can kind of do it on the cheap, and they have a lot of different devices at their disposal, and they've actually gotten really, really good at being pretty self-sufficient. We don't have to document a ton of stuff for them to get what the test is about, and generally speaking, their running orders are just to break stuff. So
that's great.
All that is helpful for us.
I just want to call out to everybody that Merritt just claimed that it saved their heinies, because that's just adorable.
I didn't know if it was appropriate to swear on here, so.
We need an explicit tag. I mean, the Digital Analytics Power Hour gets one. We should totally have one.
They are Lee? Asses.
They are. There we go. Hey, Lee.
For me, besides testing myself, it's working with the dev and the QA. I think that's actually have been, at least in my experience, the best. Going over, talking to them, walking them through. I think knowing the devs and QA is really my best friend, because
Yeah.
they share more information than usually a product manager would tell you if you ask them how they're, how the test is going and how the development is going. Whereas if you go and talk to the dev and the QA, and luckily I will plant myself and walk over to their desk in their building if I need to, just to say, hey, can you just kind of explain me how to go through this experience, and just to make sure that I can help QA as well. And they're very open to that.
That's
So
interesting, because by asking them, how do you go through this, you're also able to tell if they know how to go through it. So you're
exactly,
not just being taught, you're
yeah,
actually making sure they
yeah.
know what they're doing.
And they'll
That's
walk you
awesome.
through it, and you can see, okay, how it works, and they can clearly understand that. It's a little more time consuming, unfortunately, but at least it gives you that trust but verify confidence.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And for those of us who maybe don't have the luxury to walk to a desk or another building, you can also do that through screen share, virtual,
Yep.
or through a phone call combination.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great idea. Walk me through the process of how you're going to do this. And that's awesome. All right, we are at 3 minutes to the hour, so I want to give you guys one last chance, and you each get 1 minute. So think right now, think in your head, what is the one tip or trick that you want to leave folks with? And we'll share it. We'll just go round robin real quick, and then we'll say goodbye, and I'll send out the recording for everybody. So are you ready? Go, Merritt.
All right. This is a tip to hack the organization to grow your program. So I find that testing is a very exciting subject for people. It tends to garner interest from a lot of different folks. It's an area that's technical, strategic, creative, and some people get really excited about that thing. Use those people. Involve them in your program in some way, shape, or form. Give them projects. Allow them to contribute. You will be able to get more done. You'll get more interest in your program. You will evangelize it. And we've been able to use that as a method to grow our program and increase our throughput.
That's awesome. All right, Anna.
Save kind of the quick notes of every single test. So we have all the analytics and all of the slides of how it was built and what all the results are, but we also would just keep a PowerPoint deck that had one slide about each deck, so that if someone had a question, there was no pulling numbers, nothing, no test was thought complete until there was this one, what was the test, what did we find out, what were the next steps, and here are 2 screenshots of it. And now that Adobe Analytics has Workspace, if you're using Adobe Analytics, we put on that slide the link to the Adobe Analytics Workspace, and that is just huge in kind of not just making the tests that we have answer the question in that moment, but to the point Lee has made, a lot of times questions come up again and again, and so being able to have that, to be able to leverage it in future conversations and with new stakeholders is indispensable, so you don't have to repeat the same things again and again.
All right, Lee?
That's pretty.
I think to add on top of what Merritt and Anna say is to really, when you make the test launch, just make them fun. We always, like I said, we have the gong, we have chocolate, we have candies, we get them all involved at the same time, so they're all together and they're invested. And as well as when the test launches, share it with the ongoing test learning with them, so that they know how the time they spent, where it landed as well. If it was a test win, if it was flat, if it's not, and how to iterate off from it.
So we have Merritt, you say get an internal evangelist, have them engaged, involved in the program to help expand the program. Anna, you say summarize every test with the what, so what, and now what, and make it easy to get to so that you don't have to answer your questions a lot. And Lee says get everybody involved, get them excited, have cookies, ring a gong, whatever it takes, get people involved and make sure you share back the learnings. Did I get it?
Yeah.
I win the memory game. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. You did a great job. And sorry guys that David couldn't make it. He did ping me and say he got pulled into a fire drill. Great conversation. You guys are always awesome. Thank you everybody on the TLC, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.